Good evening. Thanks for joining us. We'll be getting started shortly. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. We'll be getting started shortly.
Hello,
Hello, Congresswoman. How are you?
I'm well. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely, it's my pleasure.
Hi, Natalia. How are you?
I'm doing okay. How are you?
I'm okay. Thank you so much for joining us. I see
Of
we have
course.
folks that are starting to come into the IG Live, and I just want to let them know that we really want this to be an interactive conversation. So if you have questions or comments, please drop them in the comment box, and I will do my best to lift them up during the conversation. But why don't we get started? Because this is a really important topic, and I think there is a lot to unpack this evening. So for all of you who have joined us, good evening and thank you for joining tonight's IG Live Justice Now programming sponsored by the National Urban League. I'm your host, Jerica Richardson, and I serve as the Senior Vice President for Equitable Justice and Strategic Initiatives at the League. And so tonight we're here to talk about the student debt crisis in America. Student loan debt has surpassed any other type of debt in this country except for housing debt. And if we look at the numbers, student loan debt has increased by more than 165 billion just since 2020. There are currently 44 million student loan borrowers in this country, and 65% of those students graduated with student loan debt in 2021. So, I mean, those are astronomical numbers. I know this is a topic that has been on the minds of so many in this country, including myself. And so, really, here to unpack this all with us is Congresswoman Yvette Clark from the great state of New York. She represents New York's 9th District, otherwise known as Central Brooklyn, to all my New Yorkers who are out there. And then we are also joined by the president and founder of the Student Debt Crisis Center, Natalia Abrams. And Natalia has really been on the front lines fighting for student loan debt reform for well over a decade. Congresswoman, Ms. Abrams, thank you both for joining us.
Thank you for having me this evening. This is an issue that has been front of mind. There's so many within communities of color and even beyond that are, just sort of languishing with the burden of the debt that they owe that have accrued over many years in some circumstances, and that has been compounded by the crisis that it has been the pandemic. So I'm really happy to be here to have this conversation this evening, and it's great to be joined here with Natalia and the good work that she's doing.
And yes, thank you so much for having us. This is such an important moment in this fight for student debt. We are all, I know borrowers we're hearing from every single day are waiting on pins and needles for a decision. We are 8 days out from payments resuming, and borrowers need to know yesterday. So I also want to thank you, Representative Clark, for being here and fighting so hard on this issue. I know that the New York delegation does a great job.
Absolutely, we're locked arms and really adamant about the need to provide student loan relief. We know that I will speak for myself. I believe that we have the resources in our nation to really get rid of the debt for all who are indebted, particularly those who are in the working class, the middle class, many who have really aged alongside a compounded interest loan they may have taken out for a child, or they may have taken out themselves when they were very young, and now they're senior citizens, still struggling with dealing with student loan debt. And we have the ability as a nation to forbear them and to make sure that we create a space for the absolving of this debt from our citizenry.
Well, thank you for that. And thank you both for really just weighing in and kind of sharing information. I think it's really important that we take the time to inform the public, inform our friends, our colleagues, and others, because this is such an important issue. And Natalia, I think you teed it up when you said folks have been waiting on pins and needles. I will say I am one of them. I know a lot of my friends, especially those who have worked in public service and nonprofit, have really endured, I think, a huge burden in pursuit of higher education, but then also wanting to serve and lead. So recently, I will say on Sunday, we had Secretary Cardona, who was on Meet the Press, and he shared that we would be hearing something from the White House in about a week or so. Now we're kind of hearing that we might hear something tomorrow. And so, Congresswoman, I know you talk to the White House frequently, and as a member of the Congressional Black Caucus, you have really been advocating on this issue. What do you anticipate the president saying? What do you think he'll do if we get news out of the White House tomorrow?
Well, let me put this in context for our viewers this evening. There are 43 million Americans with a combined $1.6 trillion in debt. And that was prior to the COVID outbreak. That in it of itself speaks volumes to the challenge that we're facing as a nation. That level of indebtedness in the aggregate is not good for our country. It's not good for our families, our neighbors, our friends, our relatives. And so I'm excited that the Biden administration has really taken this cause seriously. What I'm hearing is that they are prepared at this stage, and I believe it's a first step. I know it's a first step because I'm going to keep advocating until we have a full, forgiveness of loans. But what I'm hearing is that the administration will announce tomorrow that those making $125,000 or less and who have student debt will have $10,000 of that debt forgiven. Now, that can be for some folks what they've been waiting to hear, and will put them over the top in regaining their freedom from debt. But for many others, we know that it's a drop in the bucket when you look at the type of debt that has been accrued over some time. The average amount of debt that borrowers and students carry is like $33,000, and with with interest ticking onto it with each passing month. I'm also hearing that the moratorium will be extended beyond the August 31st deadline, and that there will be some consideration of further steps as we move forward. So, it's not everything that I personally would want, but we have to move. We have to make some inroads for those who are struggling under the weight of their student loan debt.
Well, thank you for really explaining that for us. And I mean, the numbers you shared, they're staggering. Natalia,
with a T.
Yes. So Natalia, I want to turn it over to you because, I've heard that the president understands the burden. I think that's what's been communicated to the American public from the White House and others. And I know he's had the opportunity to meet with you and other advocates. But, do you think it's important for him to meet with borrowers themselves Has he done this? And if not, do you think it's critically important that he does?
So absolutely, yes. And I will say, while over the past, year and a half of the Biden administration, there have been some meetings with the White House and advocates, but not with President Biden himself. So he needs to hear directly from advocates and, most importantly, from the borrowers themselves. I know and I trust that if President Biden heard the stories that Representative Clark and myself and so many people have heard, that would be what tipped him over to understand that, Representative Clark's absolutely right. $10,000 is a critical first step, but that's all it is. We know that, especially when we look at borrowers of color, they often borrow, 12 years plus of their white counterparts and therefore accrue far more interest and debt because of that. So we need to cancel so much more. And it's those type of stories. I hear so much of people that have took out $40,000, paid $40,000 and still owe 40 or more, right? Because of that situation. So that misnomer of, well, you took it out, so you got to pay it back. They have. So many people have paid it back, not to mention that shouldn't have been there in the first place, but that's for another call. So yes, I think, we have over 150,000 people that have signed a petition saying, demanding President Biden meet with them so he can hear their stories. And I think that that's how we will continue. This is a first step, so there is still time to meet with borrowers. We still have years of his presidency to get more debt canceled.
And just to add, I think President Biden had a direct line to one of our indebted borrowers who was in a position to pay off their loan, but, had carried it for most of their lifetime. And that's none other than President Barack Obama. When President Obama entered the White House, he was still paying off his law school debts. So I think that it's clear that particularly in communities of color, it could be a life sentence once you've borrowed for your education. And in many cases, we know that there are people who did not complete their education who are also saddled with this debt. And, that it's like 40% of the borrowers who have student loan debt never obtained their degree. And so we've got to do better by these folks. The administration, I think, gets it. Secretary Cardona has made some moves already, particularly in the for-profit education space to forgive loans. We've heard about that most recently, and they continue to look at ways in which we can lift this burden from the American people. I certainly, along with my colleagues in the Congressional Black Caucus, have this as a priority for us to have addressed. And, time is of the essence.
Well, thank you for making it a priority. As you were telling the story of, President Barack Obama, we were seeing some comments in the chat. We have Nick, who graduated in 2010 and couldn't make more than $14 an hour. And he went to grad school and accrued $200,000 in debt for physical therapy school. And now he says students are graduating from undergrad and making more than him. That's hard. I think that's a hard pill to swallow. And knowing all that has been, all that has happened in this country, especially in light of the pandemic. And there are a lot of folks that are just financially strapped on top of already struggling really to meet this responsibility and pay back their loans. But I will, I want to play devil's advocate. There are others out there who say canceling student loan debt, and having a broad-based cancellation of it, which quite frankly, the National Urban League is advocating for, that is just not possible, that it's not something that you can really do when you take a look at the student loan industry. It's far more complicated than that. I really want to hear from both of you. Why is it so complicated? Do you agree? And if not, if you disagree with that thought, why should we be able to move forward? You know, what is the research telling you? Natalia, do you want to start, and then we'll go back to the Congresswoman?
Student debt does not operate like any other type of debt. It just doesn't. I've often joked that it's easier to pay off an IRS loan than it is a student loan. Yeah, which is, you know, and we don't think of the IRS very kindly when we owe them. So this is something that, you know, that person I talked about that paid 40, owes 40 still, it's because of compounding capitalized interest. And that happens because of something called forbearance steering. When borrowers call and they say, I can't make my monthly payment, instead of loan servicers, which our tax dollars pay for, taking the time to walk them through what is best for them, instead they are just thrown into forbearance, which accrues interest and then compounds back when they get into repayment. And we see multiple of these forbearance events for student loan borrowers, increasing and ballooning their balance out of control. So even those that are trying to pay in good faith, and we hear, I would say 90% of the borrowers plus that call us say, I want to pay my loan back. I am trying to pay my loan back, but they are not making it easy for me, and it's very difficult. So it's very important to understand that back end. And then just something you mentioned that I don't want to get lost, that we've heard from borrowers of color and Black borrowers, which is that they feel, and the research shows that they have to get graduate degrees to make the same as their white counterparts with undergraduate or high school diplomas. So we see an increase for those borrowers of color having graduate degrees, and that's why 10,000 is just barely chipping away at what they need to cover for their total loan debt.
It's also it's also a matter of the complexities of the types of ways in which the federal government has underwritten loans. You have your direct loan, which is 100% government funded loan. You have your federal family education loan, which is federally backed loans funded by private lenders. You have your Perkins Loan Program, which is a jointly funded program between the government and academic institutions. So just unpacking that lends to some level of complexity. However, you know, there's nothing that we don't dedicate our energy and time to that we can't unpack. And I think that it is well worth it for us to work with the private lending industry, work with our federal industries, federal servicers, to come up with the right solutions to making sure that everyone is made whole in the end, and that our students are not bearing the brunt of a usury system that will continue to dig a hole for them, as, you know, as a means of what I consider to be just exploitation. You know, it's ridiculous that you can go into bankruptcy in any other lending space, with the exception of student loans. And so we've got to work on how we look at meticulously go through each part of this industry and provide the solutions that our folks need to get out from under this burden.
I mean, how much did we forgive? Oh, sorry to interrupt, but how much did we forgive in PPP loans? You know, that we just recently gave out a lot of money to small businesses, and it was a good thing, but all that was forgiven. And I didn't see quite the excitement and pushback as we're seeing when it comes to those that need it, frankly, the most.
You know, that's a good point. You know, we always talk about small businesses and really trying to stimulate the economy. Well, I think if there were a lot more folks walking around without student debt, we'd see a lot of stimulation in the economy right now. I want to point and circle back to a word that you shared, Congresswoman. You talked about exploitation. And I lift that up because as I'm looking through the comments, I see one from Elle, you know, who talks about, you know, her situation, what she's paid. She's paid in over $200,000 at this point, and she still owes another $70,000 on a student loan that was initially $150,000. That's what she borrowed. She wants to know, why there isn't more conversation. Why aren't folks talking more about capping interest? So I want to put that question back to both of you, especially as we're thinking about the private loan industry. And quite frankly, in some ways, that is exploitation with the interest rates continuing to rise. And it just makes it almost impossible for folks to ever break even and make good on this. Whoever
Well,
wants to.
yeah, let me say that, we're in a capitalist society,
Yeah.
and at the end of the day, unfortunately, it's capitalism run amok. And, I reflect back on, those families that, leased land to farm and were constantly unable to get out from under the debt of tenant farming. And so, this is unfortunately a long history of worker exploitation, of poor folk who don't have access to the means but have to borrow. They're in a class, we're in a class of by ourselves. And I think that there's not a lot of outcry because it's an individual burden. And I think that it's forums like this where people can come together in a safe space to talk about the fact that they have been saddled with this debt, that they have done everything they can, to pay off their debts. And they have, in the case of the young woman you were just talking about. But the extra added interest has made it such that her borrowing has become, a millstone around her ankle, weighing her down. And you would think that the industry would be happy to have recouped what they lent, but they won't be happy until that person is completely drained of every resource that they have, in making them wealthy and making their shareholders wealthy. It's an industry. That's part of our capitalist system that has always inured benefit to the wealthy of our society off of the backs of those who are not in that position. And so, this is a moment, I think, to recalibrate the way we treat our people, and the value of education, and why people borrow to begin with, and what our expectations should be around an industry that is built off of the desire to be educated in our society.
Well, that's a great point. I do want to talk, kind of pivot and talk to public service loan forgiveness. I would, Natalia, if you could share a little bit of background on that. And then I want to ask about overpayment, because we have some comments. There are many people that for years were told that they didn't qualify despite working in industries and jobs that really fell under that threshold. Were told they made too much. But then now, I think thankfully there are many people that have seen the switch from in the policies from the previous administration to the first, and now many are finding themselves eligible. And if they look at it and they're able to take advantage of the waiver, they also see that they may have overpaid substantially, for several years or many years. How do we reconcile that? And, what is the federal government doing, or what should they do to address that issue?
So public service loan forgiveness started in 2007. It was a program for those that work in nonprofit jobs, city, state, federal jobs, nurses, teachers, police officers, that type of job, depending on who pays you. if you pay your loans, federal loans, for 10 years on time, or as the department says, on time-ish and mostly in full, for 10 years, your loan should be canceled. And in 2017, what we found out was that 99.345% of applications were denied. And that was because of some of the loan types that the Congresswoman mentioned, of these older FFEL, or federal family education loan types. So while people thought they had or did have a federal loan, they had the wrong type of federal loan. And so that disqualified so many people. But I can tell you, I talked to so many people in 2017 that thought that they had dotted all their I's and crossed all their T's and called their servicers on a yearly or basis to make sure they were in the right program, only to find out they weren't. So a lot of this, to me, speaks to why we have to cancel debt for everyone. These are the complexities in the system that the Congresswoman was talking about, that time and time again failed borrowers. That's my soapbox speech, but yes, you're right. Right now there is a waiver, and that it expires October 31st. We are fighting hard to get that extended. I know there's a lot of deadlines coming at you, but that one's October 31st. And that, I feel, has made the program whole of what it intended to be. It is anyone with a federal loan that has worked for 10 years will get their cancellation. You have to make sure, if you have an older loan type, to consolidate before the 31st your loans and to do the waiver. And one of the best calls I got was from a borrower, a supporter of Student Debt Crisis Center, David, that called and said, I don't know what's going on. My balance is zero, and I have all these payments from the Department of Education in my bank account. And he thought he was going to have to pay it back. I mean, that's this distrust borrowers feel, right? He just was holding on to money and thought they were going to issue, want their money back. But we said, sir, you actually got the debt cancellation and you got the refund. We are hearing these waivers are taking months to get processed, months to get the refunds back. That's because so many people are, rushing to get this waiver. So be patient, which I know is so hard as student loan borrowers to say to you. I feel bad even saying it, but be patient. We are seeing this come through, and this is and we just need to see this waiver permanent, right? This is the way the program always should have been. And then expanded to what is a public service job. We've seen so many frontline workers make sure I get fed through the pandemic, right? And they're not, grocery store workers aren't included. There's so many workers that aren't included that I'll just be a broken, broken record here in the sense that this is why you have to cancel all the debt, because how do we parse who deserves and who doesn't?
And, as Natalia said, it was a flawed program initially. And, it didn't help that the Trump administration had a total disdain for the program. So, I want to applaud President Biden and Secretary Cardona for, staying true to this commitment. I think there's some legislative fixes that we can do in the House of Representatives to streamline and to look at what, the flaws were and fix them. And I think that that's our responsibility in the Congress, to get it right for our people. And, we are indebted to our public servants. They have helped us weather a storm like none other. And even prior to that, provide such valuable services for our society, that this is something that I believe is a no-brainer. And, as we ramp up and try to get full strength back into our bureaucracy, if you will, the idea of prioritizing these waivers, having the appropriate staff in place to process, making sure that the refunds, that we set some deadlines, that we, set up a system by which we judge our service to the people by getting things done expeditiously.
Well, thank you for your efforts, and I'm glad that this administration is doing all they can and really trying to increase capacity so that they can move through these things. But quite frankly, there are a lot of folks that are very concerned. The waiver is here now, but there's questions about permanence. We are heading into midterms. We'll have another general and presidential election coming afoot. And folks are concerned that if there's a change in leadership, that all the progress that we are starting to see will go in reverse. Is there anything that Congress can do to create more permanency to this waiver and the current program? Is there anything at all that's within your power? And if not, is there anything that we as American people can do to make sure that things stay where they are and continue on this more, I think, progressive path?
Well, I think you answered your own question. It really is about the people. This is an election year, and we have already seen what regression, what kind of havoc it can wreak on a society when you have the wrong individuals in place dictating policy. And so I just want to say that, there's no policy that, as we've come to realize, that can't be regressed by having the wrong people in place. Right now, President Biden has a strong team supporting him in the legislature. It's not as strong as it could be, but we've managed to bring through a number of historic pieces of legislation that have a direct bearing on the future of our nation and our people. If we regress, we don't go out to vote, we're not compelled to hold the line, then I really can't guarantee that the next administration or the next Congress will stand by the commitments that have been made but through this Congress. That there is no guarantee. I'm just going to be real and straight up about it. And we've already witnessed it. We've lived through it. So, I want to encourage everyone who is a part of the movement to cancel student loan debt to see their lives inextricably linked to who represents them in Washington, and use the power that they've been given through the vote to really make that difference. This is that time. We're in the midst of it now. And I would hate to see the type of pain that will be inflicted should we not be able to hold the House of Representatives or the United States Senate. These folks have already revealed their preferences, and I deal with them on a regular basis. These are not nice people. And they have other interests. It's the same interests we've been talking about, whether it's the private banks or others that benefit from the misery factor that many of our student loan debtors are struggling with right now. So let's everyone, I don't know what issue gets you going to the poll, but if your student loan debt is not one of them, then I don't even know why you're on Instagram Live this evening.
Well, I will say, Congresswoman, I am a student loan voter, 100%. And I also want to thank you. You joined on with, I just want to get it right, Senator Menendez, Murray, Kane, Gillibrand, Rep. Sarbanes, Courtney, Hayes Manning, and countless other lawmakers to sending a letter today to the Department of Education asking for the waiver to be extended until at least July 1st of 2023. I believe that's why you try to work to make it permanent and codify it into law. But just thank you so much for working hard to try to get this waiver extended for borrowers.
Absolutely.
Well, I thank you, Congresswoman, and Natalia. As I'm scrolling through, we continue. Look, there are a lot of harrowing stories that we're seeing here. There's someone that says, I'm 53 years old and I paid on my loans all my life. To finally have my loans forgiven is a relief, but I have been behind all my life because of loan debt. This debt oftentimes prevents people from really realizing their full, their full dreams, their American dream, their goals. I mean, it is a tremendous weight. In your opinion, Natalia, um, in the best of all possible worlds, assuming that folks that are on this IG Live and the American people consistently go out and make voting for people, doing their research, putting people in office, holding people accountable, that say they are for really addressing this issue. If we do all the things in a perfect world, what do we need in addition to that to make sure that we are really able to solve this crisis, to get our arms around it in a way that will free so many people in this country up to really live much fuller lives and live their full potential?
Folks are doing it now. I have, so while we are not, from what we're hearing, we're not going to get in the student debt crisis tomorrow. I've been working on this for more than a decade, as you mentioned. And so that gives me hope. A decade ago, we did not have 86 members in the Congress and the Senate signing on to cancel student debt. We did not have champions like Congresswoman Clark, Senator Schumer, Warren, Representative Presley, Representative Omar, these rock stars talking about student debt all the time. We were lucky to get anyone to even mention the word student debt, let alone be on the precipice of some debt being canceled. So, I believe that is entirely borrower and activist or advocate driven. It's from the hard work and the relentless hard work of everyone going to the polls, showing up on social media, signing petitions, getting out there in person, letter sends that have led us to this point. We just have to remember we can't let up. We can't, we have to continue till that we end the student debt crisis, which is both addressing the cost of college. I've seen some of these comments come through about what about the cost of universities and this high cost of college, along with canceling or eliminating student debt for all borrowers. That is when I can change careers. But until then, I often say, please put me out of a job. That will mean the student debt crisis is over. But until then, we haven't gone away in the last 10 years, and we're not going to go away until we solve that crisis, but we are getting closer. I'd like to think of this as a finite period of time. There was a beginning. That means there will be an ending.
Well, thank you for that. Look, I think we could continue this conversation for quite some time. I see notes about here, people that, have really sad stories of being scammed. And I mean, there's just so many layers to this issue. It's one that I think requires more time, and that we will continue to have conversations about it past August 31st, past October 31st. I think it's important that we not only, raise the alarm about the issue, but really do what we can to educate folks, to advocate, and so that, we have better outcomes for everyone. And so, as we close, I would love to give each of you a minute or two to just talk about how you are going to continue to push within your roles, within your organizations, how you're planning to use your power really to get student loan debt canceled. There's so much at stake. What are you doing? And if you have any advice for those who have joined about what they can do to join in the fight, or what they can do to continue to educate themselves as they try to navigate and wade through this process. Natalia, I'll start with you, and Congresswoman, if you could close us out.
So, but yeah, like I just said, we did not go away when we, got a new repayment program under President Obama. We did not go away when we got public service loan forgiveness. So, we are going to stay until this crisis. Student Debt Crisis Center will be around until this crisis is resolved. And we want to thank our 2 million supporters and all the folks on this Instagram Live and all the borrowers that have been getting really loud and sharing their stories. It's sharing your stories. If I have one ask for you, it's to continue speaking up and sharing your story, because it's these personal stories that sold me over a decade ago, reading so many stories, frankly, out of the Occupy movement, where we started to hear a lot about student loan debt, that led me to do this. That is what I think changes hearts and minds, and the more that we can do that, the better. So I'm really grateful to be at this moment, and I look forward to where we're about to go. And just remember that we cannot give up, because it's because of you all that we are in this place today. And we know it's not good enough. We all know the borrowers that have more than 10,000, that have more than 50,000, but we got to keep chipping away at it, right? So, and then, pay attention to repayment. We're going to keep pushing to make sure we extend the payment pause for as long as, frankly, the department needs it to implement these new programs properly, so we don't have the problems of the past. So we need to keep, pushing for that extension, pushing for more debt. I can't wait till we see presidential candidates compete on just how much debt they're going to cancel in order to get your votes. So we're making huge waves, and it's because of folks like you all hosting these events and bringing us together. So I just want to thank you for the opportunity to be here as well.
Thank you, Natalia. And I would love to see that debate with the candidates, vying to cancel debt in larger and larger numbers. I will say, I do want to encourage folks to stay in. I've gone through the public service loan forgiveness process. And as of last week, I was able to turn in paperwork, and the waiver really helped me. And I have my 120 payments. So it is possible. I'm still waiting for the final paper to say it's gone. But I really just encourage folks to take advantage of the programming. Make sure you advocate. Make sure you get involved. This is not just an educational issue. It's a justice issue. It's an equity issue. And Congresswoman, love to hear final thoughts from you. Again, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you for sharing such great information.
Well, let me thank you, Jerica, and the National Urban League for taking on this very crucial issue in this time. And we are in a very unique time. It's a time, I believe, of resetting our civil society. And one of the things that I have really pushed on is the commitment that the Biden administration made to justice, fairness, and equity, right? And, we are in a unique time where we have to recognize what our power can do in advancing our own causes. And one of my colleagues, my dearest colleague, who is now deceased, the great John Lewis, spoke so passionately about the power of the vote, because he lived it. He lived what the vote, obtaining the vote, meant for him and so many during an era where people were denied the right to vote. And he saw the amount of change take place in his life that was like, as my mother would say, going from donkey cart to airliner. And we can do the same for this generation and generations to come. The constellations are really aligned for us to have a big win right now. There are enough members in the Congress of the Congressional Black Caucus, the Progressive Caucus, to really give guidance to finalizing the end to student loan debt and putting Natalia out of business. We can do that. We can do that. However, if we don't have the type of partners in Washington that stand shoulder to shoulder with us, if we slide back and allow those who have other interests that aren't ours to become the status quo in our society, it will be another dream deferred. And so if I were to say there's one thing that everyone on this Instagram live can do, it's to become evangelistic about the right and getting people out to vote. We should not wait for a presidential year or a charismatic leader to arise to get us into the voting booth, because that charismatic leader could be a Donald Trump, right? What we need are pragmatic individuals who have demonstrated their commitment to ending the student loan crisis. And there are many, many, many out there. And then there are many already on the Hill. I would say the vast majority of the House Democrats are in lockstep with eliminating student loan debt. We need a larger majority. We need to maintain, we need the time to work with this administration to lock it in. You know, what they're doing is, you know, they're doing what they can, tinkering at the margins, getting as much done as they can, getting the ball down the court. However, you know, again, January starts a new clock, and that clock could mean that we move forward, or it could mean that we move backwards. So I want to encourage everyone. I feel great about the movement that we've had. I never expected to see this in my lifetime. You know, I was saddled with student loan debt up until the day before I was sworn in Congress. And so, you know, this is not something that I can't identify with. And I know that for many families in our community, when you have someone who has reached, you know, their middle age and they're moving into their senior citizen and they're still carrying student loan debt, many carrying the debts of their children because they signed on to those family plus loans. This is the moment. This is the moment we've been waiting for. So I want to encourage everyone. Let's take the momentum of what the Biden administration will announce tomorrow and make it a full, robust movement to once and for all get rid of student loan debt. There are enough of us on Capitol Hill. I think of Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley of Massachusetts, who has just been, I mean, she's been a siren on this issue, and she just needs us to amplify the movement that, and the passion by which she has advocated and has made us all been advocates around student loan forgiveness and getting rid of this debt. I'm excited about the possibilities and just want to encourage us to be voter evangelists. Let's get out. Let's do what we must do. The election is in November. Let's expand the House of Representatives, hold on and expand the Senate, and put the partnership in place that Joe Biden needs to be able to do what needs to be done to cancel student loan debt once and for all.
Wow, what a great charge, Congresswoman. Thank you so much. Thank you for your leadership. And Natalia, just thank you for your work and your advocacy. It is so much needed. And Congresswoman, I can't wrap without saying, it was so great to hear you lift up the late, great civil rights champion, Congressman John Lewis. I had the opportunity to intern for him after being disenfranchised as a student in college. And, one thing he always tells us to do is make sure we get into good trouble. We all have a lot of work to do. We have to create this culture of civic engagement in this country. We have an opportunity to reclaim our vote. We've been dealing with voter suppression, but this is so important. So if you've been sitting on the sidelines and really haven't been engaged, haven't been voting consistently, I encourage you to do so. Reclaim your vote, reclaim your voice, and reclaim your future. And we all know being able to get rid of this debt that is bogging so many of us down is a huge step in doing that. So thank you to everyone who has joined us. Thank you, Congresswoman Clark. Thank you, Natalia Abrams. Remember, y'all, the time for justice is always now. Go out and vote. Go out and do what you need to do to continue pushing the ball forward as we fight for the cancellation of student debt. Take care, all, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, everyone.
Bye,
Bye. Thank you
everyone.
so much.
Thank you.